Elena Carter had never imagined herself in a place like this, standing beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Grand Astoria Hotel in the heart of Manhattan. The elegant ballroom shimmered with golden light, filled with the laughter of high society guests, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the soft hum of orchestral music. It was a world far removed from the quiet streets of Brookhaven, where she worked as a journalist for a small-town magazine. She adjusted the emerald green gown that her best friend Sophie Laurent had practically forced her to wear. Sophie had always been the bold one, the dreamer who left their sleepy hometown behind to chase success. Now she was marrying into one of the wealthiest families in New York, and Elena, loyal to a fault, had agreed to be there, even though she felt utterly out of place. From the sidelines, she watched as guests glided across the dance floor, their conversations effortlessly weaving between investment deals, private jets, and exclusive art collections. She felt invisible, a stranger in a world that was not her own. Needing a moment of solitude, Elena slipped through the towering glass doors that led to the balcony. The crisp autumn air greeted her with a sharp chill, and she wrapped her arms around herself, gazing out at the endless sea of city lights. Manhattan stretched before her, dazzling and untouchable, a constant reminder of just how far she was from home. A voice, smooth and deep, emerged from the shadows. "Too loud for you in there?" She startled, turning to find a man standing just beyond the light. He stepped forward, revealing striking dark blue eyes and sharp, chiseled features. His perfectly tailored black suit framed his broad shoulders, exuding both power and effortless confidence. Elena's heart skipped a beat. He was handsome, in a way that felt both dangerous and captivating. "A little," she admitted, her voice softer than she intended. "It's overwhelming." He smirked slightly, leaning against the railing, but keeping a respectable distance. "Weddings usually are, especially when they involve this family." His words piqued her curiosity. There was something knowing in his tone, as if he had long grown tired of the glittering world inside. "You don't seem too fond of them," she observed, tilting her head. He chuckled lightly, casting a glance back at the ballroom before his intense gaze returned to hers. "Let's just say I know them well enough to prefer the balcony to the ballroom." For the first time that evening, Elena felt herself relax. There was something about him, his dry humor, the quiet way he carried himself, that made her feel less like an outsider and more like she belonged, even just for this moment. And in that moment, she had no idea that this man, Adrian Sinclair, would change the course of her life forever. The city hummed softly beneath them, the distant sound of traffic blending with the rustling of leaves in the cool autumn breeze. Elena, still caught in the quiet intensity of Adrian's gaze, felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest, something between curiosity and the thrill of stepping into unknown territory. "You don't strike me as someone who enjoys these kinds of events either," she said, allowing herself a small, knowing smile. Adrian chuckled, the deep timbre of his voice sending an unexpected warmth through her. "That obvious, huh?" She shrugged. "A little. But then again, I suppose a man like you doesn't have to enjoy them. Just tolerate them." His smirk lingered as he took a slow sip from his glass, studying her. "And what kind of man do you think I am?" Elena hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "The kind who doesn't get easily impressed. The kind who doesn't belong here either. At least not in the way they do." Adrian held her gaze, something flickering behind his dark blue eyes. "You're very perceptive, Elena." She arched a brow. "You know my name. Sophie's best friend from Brookhaven, the only one here who looks like she'd rather be anywhere else." His voice carried a teasing edge, but there was something else beneath it, an unspoken understanding. She huffed a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "Well, I'm clearly not as mysterious as you. You know my name, but I don't know yours." Adrian hesitated, as if debating whether to reveal it. Then after a moment, he extended a hand. Adrian Sinclair." She took his hand without thinking, and the moment their fingers touched, a spark of something unexplainable passed between them. Her breath hitched slightly, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Sinclair," she repeated. "That explains why you know this family so well." Adrian nodded but said nothing. It was clear he preferred to keep his thoughts guarded, but Elena was beginning to recognize the subtle shifts in his expression. the way his jaw tensed slightly, the fleeting flickers of something deeper in his gaze. They talked, their conversation flowing effortlessly from casual observations to more personal truths. Elena told him about her life in Brookhaven, how she had always loved storytelling, how she found beauty in the simplicity of her town. Adrian, in turn, shared just enough about his world, a life ruled by power, expectations, and the weight of a family name that carried both privilege and chains. Time slipped away unnoticed. The ballroom behind them slowly emptied as guests drifted home, yet neither of them moved. The city, the party, the expectations, none of it mattered anymore. As the night deepened, a chill swept through the air, making Elena shiver involuntarily. Without hesitation, Adrian shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was subtle but intoxicating, his presence surrounding her in a way that made her pulse quicken. Their eyes met again, the charged silence stretching between them. For a fleeting moment, Elena felt the ground shift beneath her, as if she were standing at the edge of something she couldn't quite name. It was reckless, it was impulsive, but it felt right. "Come with me," Adrian said softly, his voice low and unreadable. She should have hesitated. She should have questioned it. But deep down, she knew this night was meant to change something in her. "Just for tonight," he added. "No promises, no complications." Her heart pounded wildly against her ribs. Every rational thought warned her against it. But for once in her life, Elena wanted to stop thinking and just feel. "Yes," she whispered. Adrian extended his hand, and without another word, she placed hers in his. The moment their fingers intertwined, the decision was sealed. As they walked away from the balcony, leaving behind the echoes of music and laughter, Elena made a choice she didn't yet realize would alter her life forever. The next morning, Elena Carter boarded a train back to Brookhaven, the city skyline fading into the distance, as if it had been nothing more than a dream. She leaned her forehead against the window, watching the countryside blur past, trying to make sense of the night before. She told herself it had been a moment of reckless indulgence, nothing more. A night stolen from a life that didn't belong to her. A night she would tuck away as a secret, a memory to revisit on quiet evenings when she was alone. No promises, no complications. And so, she buried it. Back in Brookhaven, life resumed its familiar rhythm. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and fresh coffee from the cafe down the street. She threw herself into work, writing human interest stories, covering local events, and convincing herself that whatever had happened in New York belonged to another version of herself, one she had left behind. But then, the symptoms started. First, it was the exhaustion. No amount of sleep seemed to be enough. Then came the nausea, subtle at first, but soon overwhelming. By the time the smell of coffee, her absolute favorite, made her gag, she knew something was wrong. She ignored it at first, blaming stress, the change in weather, anything but the gnawing suspicion forming at the back of her mind. But when she nearly fainted while covering a town festival, she couldn't deny it any longer. Alone in her tiny apartment, she stared at the pregnancy test in her hands, her pulse roaring in her ears. Seconds stretched into eternity as she waited, her breath caught in her throat. Then, the result appeared. Positive. The test stick slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the sink. Her world tilted dangerously on its axis. Elena sat on the bathroom floor, knees drawn to her chest, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. She had been careful. It had only been one night. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as if she could will reality to change. "This is a mistake." She needed confirmation. The next morning, she made an appointment with Dr. Evelyn Harper, the only doctor in town who had known her since childhood. Maybe, just maybe, the test had been faulty. Maybe it was something else. But when Dr. Harper conducted the ultrasound, her expression shifted from warm reassurance to something unreadable. Elena felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice unsteady. Dr. Harper hesitated before looking at her, her voice measured but gentle. "Elena, I need you to stay calm. What I'm about to tell you, it's rare, but it's real." A strange chill swept through her. "What is it?" The doctor turned the screen toward her, pointing at the flickering images. You're not carrying just one baby. Elena's breath hitched. Twins? No, Dr. Harper said softly, her voice tinged with amazement. There are multiple heartbeats. A pause, then. Elena, you're pregnant with septuplets. 7 babies. The words crashed into her like a tidal wave. The sterile white walls of the room blurred. The sound of the ultrasound machine faded into a distant hum. She clutched the edge of the examination table, her knuckles turning white. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. That's impossible. But the evidence was right there, on the screen. 7 tiny, flickering heartbeats, each one impossibly real. Dr. Harper placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I know this is overwhelming, but you are healthy, and from what I can see, so are they. This is rare, Elena, but it's happening. Elena felt the burn of hot tears pressing behind her eyes. How was she supposed to do this? She was a journalist in a small town, barely able to take care of herself. 7 babies? She barely knew their father. Their father? The thought made her stomach twist. She hadn't spoken to Adrian since that night. She didn't even have a way to reach him. Would he even believe her if she told him? Would he want anything to do with this? Her mind screamed at her to keep it to herself. She had made the decision to spend that night with him. This was her responsibility, not his. But as the days passed, as her body began to change, as the reality of carrying 7 lives within her settled deeper into her bones, the weight of it all became unbearable. She needed help, even if she hated the idea of asking for it. And then one morning, a sleek black car appeared in front of her apartment. Elena stood at the window, her heart pounding violently against her ribs as she watched a woman step out, poised, elegant, and unmistakably powerful. There was only one reason someone like that would be here. By the time the knock came at her door, Elena already knew. She took a slow, steadying breath before opening it. The woman smiled, polite but unreadable. Miss Carter, my name is Margot Lane. I represent Adrian Sinclair. The world tilted once more. Elena stood frozen in the doorway, her fingers gripping the edge of the frame as if it could somehow steady her against the storm of emotions brewing inside her. Margot Lane, Adrian Sinclair. The names rang in her head like a warning bell, a reminder that the past she had tried so desperately to keep buried had come knocking, literally. May I come in? Margot's voice was smooth, professional, but not unkind. Elena hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to shut the door and pretend none of this was happening. But what good would that do? Adrian knew. Somehow he had found out. She stepped aside, her movements stiff, and Margot entered, taking in the small but cozy apartment with a quick, practiced glance. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to negotiating high-stakes situations. Elena gestured toward the couch. I assume you're not here for a casual chat? Margot sat gracefully, crossing her legs. No, Miss Carter. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Sinclair. He recently became aware of your situation and… You mean the pregnancy? Elena cut in, her voice sharper than she intended. Margot's expression remained neutral. Yes. Elena exhaled slowly, sinking into the armchair opposite Margot. And what does Mr. Sinclair want? Margot reached into her sleek leather bag and pulled out a thick folder, setting it on the coffee table between them. Elena eyed it warily, as if it might explode. Adrian takes this matter very seriously, Margot continued, her tone measured. He has instructed me to ensure that you have access to the best medical care and financial support necessary. This folder contains details of a private medical team, a fully equipped residence where you would be more comfortable, and a financial arrangement that… Stop! Elena held up a hand, her heart pounding. I don't need his money. For the first time, Margot's composure faltered just slightly. Miss Carter, this isn't charity. Adrian understands that this is an extraordinary situation. He simply wants to ensure that I'm taken care of. Elena scoffed, folding her arms. Where was this concern when he left that night without so much as a phone number? Margot's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. Elena let out a shaky breath, rubbing her temples. She had spent weeks wrestling with this, with the crushing fear of doing it alone. And now suddenly, Adrian wanted to step in? Where is he? She asked finally. Currently in New York, Margot replied. but he is making arrangements to come to Brookhaven. Elena's stomach twisted. The idea of seeing him again, facing him, knowing what had happened since that night, terrified her. "Tell him he can speak to me directly," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "No more lawyers, no more intermediaries. If he wants to be involved, he can come here and say it himself." Margot studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I will relay your message." She gathered the folder and rose, pausing at the door. "Miss Carter, I understand your hesitation, but I urge you to consider what's best, not just for you, but for your children." Elena flinched at the weight of that word. Children. 7 of them. As Margot disappeared into the waiting car, Elena shut the door and leaned against it, her hands pressed against her stomach. For weeks, she had carried this secret alone, but that was no longer an option. In just a few days, Adrian Sinclair would be standing in front of her again, and this time neither of them could walk away. 2 days later, Elena stood by the window of her apartment, watching as a sleek black car pulled up outside. Her pulse quickened. Adrian Sinclair had arrived. For a fleeting moment, she considered not opening the door. She could pretend she wasn't home, let him leave, and continue convincing herself that she could handle this alone. But deep down, she knew that was a lie. Taking a slow, steadying breath, she forced herself to move. By the time she opened the door, he was already standing there. Adrian Sinclair was exactly as she remembered him, tall, effortlessly composed, exuding a quiet authority. But there was something different now. His gaze wasn't just unreadable, it was searching, uncertain. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then finally, "Elena." Her name on his lips sent a ripple through her, stirring emotions she wasn't ready to face. "You actually came," she said, arms crossed as if shielding herself. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "Of course I did." She studied him carefully, looking for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of doubt, but there was none. Stepping aside, she let him in. Inside, the space felt too small, too intimate, now that he was here. He didn't belong in this world of secondhand furniture and cozy clutter, and yet here he was. "You wanted to talk?" she prompted, breaking the silence. Adrian nodded. "I don't know what I expected when Margot told me, but I know I didn't expect this." "This?" she echoed, her voice laced with defiance. "7 babies, Elena," he said, his tone unreadable. "That's extraordinary." She let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. "Tell me about it." Adrian exhaled slowly, his hands in his pockets as he studied her. "I'm not here to make excuses. I should have reached out sooner. I should have left you with more than just a memory of that night." His honesty caught her off guard. She had braced for denial, anger, even indifference, but not this. "I don't need your apologies, Adrian. I just need to know. Why now?" He hesitated. "Because I had no idea. If I had known, I never would have let you go through this alone." Elena searched his face, looking for deception. There was none. "And now that you do know?" she asked cautiously. Adrian stepped closer, his presence calm yet commanding. "Now I'm asking you to come with me." Her breath caught. "Come with you? To my home? To the Sinclair estate?" His voice was steady, certain. "It's the safest option for you. For them." She stiffened. "You think I can't take care of myself?" "I think carrying 7 children is already more than anyone should have to handle alone." His tone wasn't condescending, just brutally honest. She wanted to argue, to push him away. But the truth was, she was exhausted. Every day had been a battle. The whispers in town, the growing fear of what was coming, the weight of doing this alone. "You expect me to just pack up my life and go with you?" she asked, though her voice had lost its edge. "I expect you to let me help," Adrian said simply. "That's all." Elena swallowed hard, staring at the man she barely knew. The man who was about to become an undeniable part of her life. Could she really do this? Could she trust him? After a long silence, she exhaled, her decision settling deep in her bones. "All right, Adrian." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I'll come with you." And just like that, her life would never be the same. The Sinclair estate was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. Sprawling across acres of meticulously manicured land, the mansion stood like a monument to power and old money. its towering stone facade both breathtaking and intimidating. The wrought iron gates creaked open slowly, almost theatrically, as the black car carried her up the winding driveway. Elena swallowed hard, one hand resting protectively on her stomach as the weight of her decision settled over her. Adrian had been quiet for most of the ride, but now, as they neared the grand entrance, he finally spoke. "I know this is a lot." She let out a dry laugh. "Understatement of the year." Adrian smirked but said nothing else as the car rolled to a stop. As soon as she stepped out, she felt the invisible eyes of the estate on her. The staff, poised and professional, moved efficiently, yet she could sense their curiosity, their silent judgment. But it wasn't them that unsettled her. It was the man standing at the top of the marble steps. Tall, severe, and exuding a quiet menace, Sebastian Sinclair, Adrian's older brother, watched her approach with an expression that was impossible to read but easy to interpret. He was not pleased. "So," he said, his voice cool and clipped, "you're the woman turning our family into a spectacle." Elena bristled. Before she could reply, Adrian stepped in front of her, his voice dangerously low. "Enough, Sebastian." The tension between them crackled in the air. Sebastian's gaze flicked to Elena again, calculating, assessing. Then with a disinterested shrug, he turned and walked inside. "Charming," Elena muttered. Adrian sighed. "Ignore him. He's resistant to change." "Resistant?" He looked at me like I'm a parasite. Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't argue. Elena exhaled, already feeling like an outsider in a world she did not belong to. Maybe this had been a mistake. Inside, the estate was even grander than she had imagined. A team of house staff took her bags, and Adrian personally led her to a lavish guest suite. The room, adorned with antique furnishings, high ceilings, and a private balcony, was stunning, but it felt impersonal. "Is everything acceptable?" Adrian asked, watching her carefully. Elena forced a smile. "It's beautiful. More than I expected." "Good," he said, visibly relieved. "Dinner's in an hour. You'll meet the rest of the family then." The rest of the family. She wasn't sure if that was meant to reassure her or send her running. But before she could dwell on it, something in the corner of the room caught her eye. A door, slightly ajar, leading to what appeared to be a study or small library. "What's in there?" she asked. Adrian followed her gaze, his expression momentarily unreadable. Just an old storage room, nothing important. But something about the way he said it made her stomach twist with unease. That night after dinner, a tense, awkward affair in which Sebastian made it very clear that she was unwelcome. Elena found herself unable to sleep. The house was too quiet, too filled with secrets. So she did the one thing she knew she shouldn't. She went exploring. The hallway outside her room was dark, lined with old portraits that seemed to watch her as she moved. The air smelled faintly of aged wood and something else, dust perhaps, or history. She followed her instincts, moving toward the door she had noticed earlier. With a hesitant breath, she turned the handle. It creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit study. Inside, dust-covered shelves lined the walls, filled with old ledgers, faded documents, and stacks of yellowed newspapers. A forgotten room, untouched by time. Elena's heart pounded as she stepped inside. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she found it. On the ancient desk beneath a pile of old files was a newspaper clipping. She picked it up, her hands trembling as she read the headline. "Toxic spill in Brookhaven, dozens affected." Elena's breath caught, her vision swimming. Brookhaven, her home, the place where she had grown up, where her parents had struggled but survived. And yet, it had been poisoned by the very family she had unknowingly entangled herself with. The words on the page blurred as her pulse roared in her ears, her hands tightening around the brittle newspaper as if holding onto it could somehow keep her world from crumbling apart. The article detailed a catastrophic industrial accident, a toxic spill that had poisoned the town's water supply years ago. The company responsible? Sinclair Industries. Elena's vision swam. Memories crashed over her. The rumors, the unexplained illnesses, the quiet suffering that had plagued Brookhaven. She had been just a child when it happened, but she remembered. And now, standing in the heart of the Sinclair estate, she realized the truth she had never known. the family she had just tied herself to, was responsible for the tragedy that had shaped her entire life. Elena stood frozen, the newspaper trembling in her hands. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as her mind raced to process what she had just uncovered. Sinclair Industries, Adrian's family, the very people offering her protection, support, and a place in their world, were the same ones who had once destroyed hers. Her breath came in short, uneven bursts as she sank into the worn leather chair behind the desk. How had she never known? How had she never connected the dots? The toxic spill had been one of those tragedies that people whispered about but never fully understood. Families had suffered, people had fallen ill. Her own parents had been affected, though they had never spoken about it, and now she knew why. Because it had been buried. Because the Sinclair family had made sure of it. She scanned the desk for more information, her fingers rifling through brittle documents. There were ledgers, payments, letters, evidence of a cover-up so meticulously orchestrated that it had erased the incident from public memory. Her stomach twisted. The very name Sinclair, which had once been nothing more than an afterthought from a night in Manhattan, was now tangled in her past in ways she had never imagined. And she had walked straight into their hands. Her first instinct was to run, to pack her things, leave the estate, disappear. But where would she go? 7 lives were growing inside her. 7 futures that depended on the choices she made now. Elena clenched her jaw, forcing down the rising panic. She needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to her. She found Adrian in his study, seated behind an expansive mahogany desk. He looked up when she entered, his expression shifting the moment he saw her face. "Elena?" He stood immediately, concern flickering in his gaze. "What's wrong?" She threw the newspaper onto his desk. "You tell me." Adrian's eyes flicked down to the clipping. The second he saw it, his entire body went still. For a long moment, there was silence. Then finally, "Where did you find this?" His voice was measured, but she heard the undercurrent of something darker beneath it. "That's what you care about," she snapped. "Not the fact that your family is responsible for poisoning an entire town? For ruining lives?" Adrian exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. "Elena, it's not that simple." "No?" She took a step closer, her voice shaking. "Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn simple." His jaw tightened. "I didn't know," he admitted finally, his voice raw. "Not at first. I was a kid when it happened, and by the time I learned the truth, it was too late. The damage had already been done." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and for the first time she saw something deeper in his gaze. Regret. Shame. The burden of a legacy he never wanted to carry. By the time I was old enough to start asking questions, it had already been buried. And when I did find out, when I started looking into it, he let out a slow breath, his eyes darkening. Sebastian made sure I stayed quiet. Elena's stomach twisted. Sebastian. "So what?" she challenged. "You just let it go?" Adrian's gaze snapped to hers, sharp and unyielding. "Do you think I wanted to? Do you think I was okay with it?" She swallowed hard but said nothing. He exhaled, his voice quieter now. "I tried, Elena. I fought with him, with my father before he died. But this family, this company has been built on secrets. And every time I tried to uncover one, I was reminded of just how little power I actually had." She wanted to believe him. But how could she? "And now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now that you do have power?" Adrian's gaze held hers, unwavering. "Now I fix it." She let out a bitter laugh. "Just like that?" "No," he said firmly. "Not just like that. It won't be easy. There will be backlash. People will fight it. Sebastian will fight it. But I swear to you, Elena, I will make this right." His conviction was undeniable. But was it enough? Could she trust him to fight for the truth when his own family had spent years hiding it? Elena crossed her arms, her heart pounding. "I need more than words, Adrian." He nodded once. "Then let me show you." And for the first time, she let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of something greater. The next morning, Elena woke to a different kind of silence. Not the comforting stillness of dawn, nor the weight of uncertainty pressing on her chest. This was the silence before a storm. She had barely slept after her confrontation with Adrian. His words had stayed with her, replaying in her mind over and over. Now I fix it. But words meant nothing without action, and she needed proof. She needed to see if Adrian truly meant what he said, or if he would become just another Sinclair willing to let the past stay buried. So when she stepped out of her suite and found the entire household unusually subdued, she knew something had shifted. Something was happening. Adrian was waiting for her in the grand sitting room, standing by the window, his posture rigid, his hands tucked into his pockets, a man preparing for war. "Sebastian knows," he said without preamble, turning to face her, "and he's not going to back down without a fight." Elena stiffened. "What does that mean?" "It means he wants a meeting, now." Her pulse quickened. "You're bringing me?" Adrian's gaze held hers, unwavering. "You deserve to be there." And so they went to face the man who had spent years ensuring the Sinclair family remained untouchable. Sebastian was waiting in his private study, an expansive room lined with towering bookshelves and filled with the scent of old leather and expensive whiskey. He sat behind his massive desk, completely at ease, as if this was just another business deal to be negotiated. "Brother," he greeted smoothly, though his gaze was sharp, "and Miss Carter, how persistent you both are." Elena clenched her jaw, but it was Adrian who spoke first. "We both know why we're here, Sebastian." Sebastian leaned back in his chair, studying them as though they were nothing more than minor obstacles in his carefully constructed world. "You've always had a dangerous fascination with justice, Adrian. It's endearing, really. Naive, but endearing." Adrian's jaw ticked, but he kept his composure. "We're reopening the case." His voice was steady, final. "Brookhaven, the spill, everything." Sebastian let out a slow, deliberate sigh. "And here I thought you would have learned by now." He pushed a folder across the desk, his movements calm, too calm. Elena's stomach twisted as Adrian picked it up, flipping it open. His expression darkened instantly. "What is this?" Sebastian's lips curled into a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's every journalist, every investigator, every lawyer who has ever tried to drag this family's name through the mud. You see, Adrian, we don't just bury scandals. We bury the people who try to uncover them." Elena's blood ran cold. "Are you threatening us?" she demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. Sebastian met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Miss Carter, if I were threatening you, you would know it." Adrian's grip on the folder tightened, his knuckles turning white. "You think you can scare us into silence?" Sebastian exhaled slowly, as if he were speaking to a child who simply didn't understand how the world worked. "I don't need to scare you, Adrian. I just need to remind you what's at stake. You want to destroy the Sinclair name? Fine, but let's not pretend it won't destroy you too." Elena felt her breath catch, because Sebastian wasn't wrong. Going against him, against the family, against the empire they had built on deception and power, would come at a cost. The question was Adrian truly willing to pay it? The ride back was suffocating in its silence. Every bump in the road felt like an unspoken warning, every shadow cast by the towering trees, a reminder of the battle they had just stepped into. Elena stared out the window, gripping the seat as if the weight of the truth might pull her under. She had come looking for the truth, but now that she had it, she realized something chilling. The truth was dangerous. It wasn't just about revealing what had happened in Brookhaven. It was about going up against a family that had the power to erase people like her. When the car pulled to a stop, she turned to Adrian. "Tell me the truth." His hands tightened into fists on his lap. "Elena, if you go through with this, if you fight him, what happens to you?" Adrian exhaled, his expression raw in a way she had never seen before. "I don't know." For the first time, he looked uncertain, because this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. And for the first time, Elena wondered if they would make it through this alive. Elena stood in the grand sitting room of the Sinclair estate, her heart pounding as the weight of her decision pressed down on her. Across from her, Adrian's gaze burned with intensity, his jaw set in determination. Between them, the unspoken threat of Sebastian's power loomed like a shadow, a final warning that stepping forward meant risking everything. "We have to do this," Adrian said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Elena swallowed hard. "And if we lose?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Then we lose," Adrian admitted. "But at least we won't be the ones bearing the truth." The truth. It had already cost them so much. But looking at Adrian now, at the man who had chosen to fight against his own bloodline, she realized she had already made her choice. She couldn't turn back. Not now, not when she had 7 lives growing inside her, 7 futures that deserved a world where the truth wasn't silenced. Taking a deep breath, she met his gaze, steady and unyielding. "Then we fight." The decision set everything into motion. Within days, the Sinclair scandal erupted into the public eye. The media pounced on the revelation, their headlines exposing the long-buried truth. Sinclair Empire's darkest secret uncovered. Brookhaven's poisoned past. Adrian Sinclair turns against his own family. The story spread like wildfire, and no amount of power, money, or legal maneuvering could contain it. Sebastian did not go down without a fight. He unleashed his full arsenal, teams of lawyers, threats to suppress the damage, desperate attempts to protect the family's crumbling empire. But it was too late. The truth had been set free, and there was no bearing it again. The fallout was swift and brutal. Investors pulled away, public outrage surged, and the Sinclair name, once synonymous with power and wealth, became a cautionary tale of corruption and greed. In the end, Sebastian was forced to resign, stripped of the empire he had once ruled with an iron grip. And Adrian? He stepped into the wreckage, not to reclaim what was left of his family's power, but to rebuild it differently. He dismantled the corruption, piece by piece, ensuring that the victims of Brookhaven finally got the justice they had been denied for so long. Elena watched it all unfold, knowing they had done the right thing, even if it had nearly cost them everything. But the real victory was something far more personal. Months later, in the quiet hum of a hospital room, she held the tiniest, most perfect hand in hers. Then another, and another. 7 heartbeats, 7 miracles. 7 reasons why fighting had been worth it. Adrian stood beside her, exhaustion deep in his bones, but his gaze was filled with something else. Wonder. 7 heartbeats, 7 futures. 7 reasons why every battle they had fought was worth it. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as he brushed against one of the tiny blankets. "We made it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet beeping of monitors and the soft breaths of their newborns, Elena knew they had not just survived, they had won. "We made it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he reached out, gently brushing his fingers over one of the tiny blankets. Elena let out a shaky laugh, tears pooling in her eyes, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something deeper, hope. They had fought, they had won, and now they had everything to fight for.